I was sort of lucky that I ended up on the team that I did end up on, because there was all the AI buzz that was really starting to build up around that time. And I
Mm,
initially didn't even plan on going in on working on AI stuff. I actually really wanted to work on the HoloLens.
mm,
That never really worked out, but I found myself sort of in the center of the storm when OpenAI really blew up, and we got first access to a lot of that technology. So we really started implementing that stuff very quickly.
mm.
Um, and it's actually funny. A lot of people always ask me, or are very surprised to hear that I left Microsoft when I did, especially
Yeah.
with AI blowing up and everything. But I think I really got to the point where I realized as a PM, I was stagnating in my own growth, and I had really learned what I had come to learn at Microsoft. So I stopped feeling stretched.
Hey everyone, welcome to PM Talks. My name is Michael. I'm a product manager at Google, and today I'm joined by Bema Bonsu, who is a product manager at Intuit, previously worked at companies like Microsoft, and is a software engineer by trade. And we're really excited to talk to you about some of your frequently asked questions, all things related to landing your PM role out of college, as well as some of the key learnings that Bema is going to share with us about how to be a great PM. Let's get started. Bema, do you want to give us a quick introduction of yourself that goes a little bit into more detail about what you're doing at Intuit?
Yeah. So I'm currently working at Intuit as a futures technology PM, which is actually a really unique role that didn't really know existed until I landed this role. And so what our job is to really look a couple years into the future and see what technology is out there and how it may affect Intuit, and to sort of try to anticipate that and see how we can implement some of those things into our future roadmap.
Super cool. So I was covering a little bit about your background before working at Intuit. You were at Microsoft. And so if you can tell us a little bit about what you were doing there, that would be cool.
Yeah. So I was at Microsoft for 3 years, about 3 years as a full-time employee.
Hmm.
Before that, I was a software intern, and after that summer, I became a PM intern before I went
Hmm.
full-time. But yeah, I worked full-time on the Azure platform, cognitive services. So I did a lot of work with AI models, specifically for OCR, computer vision technology.
Hmm.
So we were looking at a lot of things like extracting information from documents, whether those are like tax forms, invoices, you name it, we extracted it.
And you were a product manager for a summer and also a software engineer as a summer. So I'm super curious to like learn about why you made that transition from an intern as a software engineer and decided to come back the next summer as a PM.
Yeah, so there's a good answer here and there's a bad answer. The real bad answer is that I just come off of a very hard course in engineering,
Hmm.
and I went directly into a software internship. And by the end of that internship, I was done with programming. But I'd also been introduced to product manager over the course of that internship.
Yeah.
Sort of shadowed her during that summer and got very interested into a product thing. So sort of a marriage of the two. And through her, through shadowing her, I learned about what the role of product did, and I was actually able to interview for a product role after
Nice.
that summer. And then I realized I actually just really enjoyed product. And so when I went back to school after I crossed the burnout stage and got back into software, really enjoyed it. I got the choice to decide where I was going to come back as a product manager or software engineer, and I thought I would try it out. And it's what I've enjoyed ever since.
For those people who might be in the bucket of software engineer thinking about PM, is there any advice you would give them about how to make that decision? And when do you know that you're ready to be a PM?
Yeah, that's a great question and another tough one. There's actually a period of time where I thought that I had made a mistake switching to PM. To be completely honest, I considered going back to software. I think it's the biggest difference is in how you work. If you're the type of person who likes to put their head down on one problem and focus on that to completion, I say you're probably better off staying in software. With PM, there's a lot of context switching. You might be in a meeting with sales, then you're in a meeting with design, then engineering. You're constantly switching, and
Hmm.
it's definitely something you have to get used to. It's something that at first I thought I could not get used to, and I
Hmm.
have.
Hmm.
But it is definitely something that if you are uncomfortable with that, you are not going to enjoy the PM role. But if you can get comfortable with it, it is also very rewarding in the sense that you get to see the entire shape of the product. When I was a software engineer, I would be told a task to do, and I'd have some context as to why I was doing it, but I wouldn't really understand the full impact through to the customer. As a
Mhm.
PM, I get to see that, and that's really energizing. I get to see from concept, from research to concept implementation to actual impact on customers, the whole
Mhm.
journey. And that to me is so much more interesting
Yep.
than focusing on one problem. Now, don't get me wrong, I still do like the time that I get to focus on one problem. I still enjoy coding. I code some things in my free time
Mhm.
just because I find it fun.
Yep.
But if you like sort of the wider view, wider spectrum of problems, then I say PM is probably a good fit for you.
I love that. That's a really good tip. I think a lot of people are gonna, really understand, how to make that decision better with that advice. So thank you so much. For today, we're gonna go into three key things as we talked about in the intro. The first thing is to get to know your journey to get to this role into a little bit better. So yeah, we'll cover on, your first role as a PM, growing in that role, as well as finding your next role outside of Microsoft. Um, and then we'll talk about, in this current market, like it's very difficult to land that first PM role, or even once you have multiple years of experience, transition into a new company, just because it's such a competitive market with limited roles out there. Like, how did you do that? And lastly, some of your theories around what it means to be a great PM. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, let's jump into sort of your journey into this current role at Intuit.
Mhm.
What was the process like from going at Microsoft to this new role?
Yeah, so really, I started, as I mentioned, I started my career at Microsoft. It was a great place to start my career. I was sort of lucky that I ended up on the team that I did end up on, because there was all the AI buzz that was really starting to build up around that time. And I
Mhm.
initially didn't even plan on going in on working on AI stuff. I actually really wanted to work on the HoloLens.
Mm.
But that never really worked out. But I found myself sort of in the center of the storm when OpenAI really blew up, and we got first access to a lot of that technology. So we really started implementing that stuff very quickly.
Mhm.
Um, and it's actually funny. A lot of people always ask me, or are very surprised to hear that I left Microsoft when I did, especially
Yeah.
with AI blowing up and everything. But I think I really got to the point where I realized as a PM, I was stagnating in my own growth, and I had really learned what I had come to learn at Microsoft. So I stopped feeling stretched. The way I like to say it is that when I first joined Microsoft, especially that first 6 months, it was like drinking water out of a fire hose.
Right.
And at a certain point, I started to level out, and I felt like I wasn't growing as quickly as I
Yeah.
as I wanted to. So I really wanted to be out of my depth again, and the opportunity at Intuit seemed like the perfect situation for me. So
Mhm.
how I personally got hooked up with that role was actually through a mutual. And I find a lot of things in tech tend to be that way.
Mhm.
Networking is a must, especially when you're in such a lean market such as this. And I'm always an advocate for like actual networking, not in the superficial way. Like actually,
Mhm.
I like to network with people who I like actually find interesting, who's are doing jobs in areas that I think I'd like to be in one day, and get
Mhm.
to know them as an actual person. I think we've all been in that scenario where you're networking with somebody, but it's obvious that they just want another follower on LinkedIn. And
Mhm.
I feel like that's never really a good way to go about it. I feel like you should network with people who you feel like you have a genuine connection with or a shared interest with, because it really does come through. Um, so yeah, that's how I sort of got introduced to the job at Intuit, and then I got an offer in February, started in March, and it's been great ever since.
Nice. Was that connection a referral or helping you get introduced to a hiring manager? How does that help?
Yeah, so in a lot of scenarios, from my understanding, what referrals in tech normally do is it just guarantees that an actual human being will look at your resume. Um,
Mm.
as you probably know, there's a lot of these robo resume readers, and if you don't have the right keywords on it, um, you will never even be seen. I'm
Right.
not an expert on those things. I do know they exist, though. The
Mhm.
way I've circumvented that throughout my career in tech so far is asking somebody that I know who's actually there to put a good word in for me. So I
Yeah.
would definitely say network. I'm a USC Trojan, so there's a strong network at USC. I know there's strong networks everywhere, but that's a great one. But I always try to help people in general, but especially if it's somebody from my school, I always try to put in a good
Right.
word for them, make some time for them. So if you are also looking for a job, look for alumni from your school to hopefully
Yeah.
help you out.
That was actually the question I had is, a lot of people are told to network and build that, but I think people are, wondering where do I start? Is it cold outreach on LinkedIn or connections I have on LinkedIn, or is it my alumni going to events? Like, how did you prioritize, in the past 4 or 5 years building your network? Like, where did you spend the most time, building those relationships?
That's a great question. And I actually have two main thoughts here. One is if you are going to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, especially if it's somebody that you don't know, but you have some sort of mutual connection to, have a plan. I think I realized because I was at Microsoft during this big open AI boom, I got a lot of requests from people,
Right.
especially from my college, to reach out to me. And I just did not have time to respond to all of them.
Mm,
But the ones that I prioritized were the people that had a plan. The worst thing you can say is, "Hey, I went to USC. I was looking for a job. Can you help me?" There's
mm,
no entry point there. The best thing you can do is be very specific. "Hey, I'm a third year student at USC. I would really like to talk to you about how I can land an internship at Microsoft. I'm open on X day, Y day, Z day at these times. Do
mhm,
any of these times work for you?" It is so easy for me to then be like, I know exactly what you want to talk about. You've given me
mhm,
times. We don't have to go back and forth. I can look at my calendar, say, okay, at this time I'm open, and I can just
mhm.
book it right there. Make it as easy as possible for the
Right.
person to say yes to you. Because
Yeah.
the more vague you are, the harder it is for them to make time. And
Yeah.
then the second thing I'll say is where to start. I really think that school, like based on your school, is normally a safe place to start. Looking at alumni, I find, at least in my experience, people are normally happy if they have the time to do that. But then I'd
Mhm.
also say if you are in school right now, really network and connect with people. I've gotten so much help from people that I've just known through school who I had a genuine connection with, right? Whether we connected about USC sports or an anime, anything like
Mhm.
that, whether they needed help or I needed help, that were more than happy to help me because I had a genuine connection with them. I also say that there's people from school who I did not know very well, who it's very obvious that they just wanted to make a networking connection, and I'll
Right.
still help those people if I have bandwidth to, but I'm
Right.
definitely less likely to help those people than somebody who I feel like I had a genuine connection with. So I'd say prioritize those genuine connections, and they will help you out in the future.
That's a lot of really good info there. Like, you dropped some gems on what to actually write in a LinkedIn DM, being very clear, transparent. I love that. I also get those requests, and I'm looking at, all right, which should I respond to? I have 10 minutes maybe after work or before I have to go do something else, and it's usually the ones that are more clear, right? They're very
Definitely.
specific about what they're looking for. Now, maybe we can chat a little bit about your ideas around what it means to be a great PM. You've had some early career, success so far, worked at two really great companies, worked on some really cool projects. So I'm really curious to see what have you seen as like great signs of what it means to be a good PM.
Yeah, that's a great question and a very hard question. I think that PM is one of the most diverse roles in tech. It varies so much based on the company that you're at, the team that you're on, the time of the season, based on the product that you're working on. There are so many things, but I do think that there are some commonalities that you find in all good PMs. I think the first thing is being good at storytelling.
Mm,
Um, really, as a PM, right? There's a product or a feature that you want to get built, and you don't have direct influence over the designers, the engineers, but you still need to get everybody pulling in the right direction. I think one of my mentors said it's like you get all of the pressure on you, but none of the direct authority, and it's true. And the way you have to manage this is by being a great storyteller.
mm,
You have to tell a compelling enough story that your engineers and designers wake up in the morning and say, "This is a vision that I want to go and create,"
mhm,
and that is difficult, especially if it isn't something that is super exciting to you. You have to make it exciting. You
mm,
have to make it something that your team wants to build. Um, and so I'd say that as a piece of storytelling, One of the videos that I watched was from a uh, PM that worked at Google, and she said that like what she likes to do is she likes to always start a new product or feature with a statement of, if we achieve what we want to, the world will look like this.
Hmm.
And this is something that is always energy inspiring. Like, it's something that's like, this is something that I can see in my mind's eye that I want to go and achieve. And I ever since I've seen that, I've run with it. And I think it is a really powerful tool in galvanizing people to want to build things. Um Obviously storytelling is not all of it. You also need to come with data, right? We work at tech companies who have like revenue targets and everything. And
Right.
people don't just want to hear you talk about the sunshine and the rainbows that are going to spring up when you build this feature, right? You have to come with
Right.
hard facts about things. So really being data driven, I think, is extremely important as a PM. You have to have data behind every decision you make, because people will ask you, and you don't want to say it's because I feel this will work. You want to
Mhm.
have hard facts about things. Um, I will also say that it is extremely important as a PM to be the most knowledgeable person of the 360 view of things. Um, a lot of your job as a product manager is to have that 1,000 yard view that other people are just not able to have because of the roles that they have. An engineer
Mhm.
doesn't have time to go speak to design every day. They don't have time to go speak to customers. Same thing with designers; they're all in their silos. But you are the one that's expected to see that, have the 1,000 yard view, and say, okay, we should head in this direction because I have all of the pieces. So you should be having conversations all the time with everybody, with all the stakeholders. So you always have a comprehensive view of where the product or feature is going, and the potential pitfalls that are coming over the horizon that people won't see because they have their heads down doing work. You are the person that is steering the ship. If there's an iceberg, you are calling it out, because if you don't, you are going to run into it. So
Mhm.
I think it is very important to make sure that you have all of the knowledge, and you're making sure that you are staying up to date on all of the latest information, whatever that means for your product or your feature.
Mm.
The last thing I will say is about this is that one of my mentors said something that I found very true, and he said that each good PM that he's met has a superpower. And what that means is just one thing that they're very good at. And this can really be anything. Everybody has one. It's really a matter of finding what it is for you. You could be a very process driven person. You're very good at creating processes. You could be a very customer obsessed PM. I'd say
Mhm.
that these tend to fall in two buckets, but there's flavors of each. But there's tends to be the very product focused PM, and the PM that is very close to engineering. On one end, the very product focused PM is, I understand the customer almost better than they understand themselves. And
Mhm.
I have all of this information about what we need to build. Now, engineering team designers, let's go and build it. I don't know how we're going to build it. I don't know how it's going to look, but I know that these are the key features that we have. And then
Mhm.
there's the other end of, I'm very close to the technical side. I understand the engineers' timelines, the sort of the difficulties that they're running into, and I
Mhm.
can translate customer pain points into these technical pieces. Most people aren't going to be great at both, but if you
Mhm.
can be really good at one, you can help your team
Yeah.
in a very strong way. So it's really, find what your superpower is and really hone that skill. Is some advice I got that I think is really good.
I like that last one, especially because it does feel like as PM you should be great at everything. And it feels like you need to dive deep into customer problems and help engineering and be able to communicate really effectively on technical trade-offs there as well. But the feedback here, or the idea is like, do something really well and don't spread yourself too thin. Because then maybe you're just not adding that much value at the end of the day if you can't be good at one thing.
Exactly. Jack of all trades, master of none, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
that thing of like, and I think the thing I learned very early on in my career is stretching yourself too thin. You're
Mhm.
making everybody mildly happy, or at
Right.
worst mildly unhappy. Much better to focus your energy on the most important things
Yeah.
than try to do everything.
I love it. Okay, so you covered four really key things: the storytelling, being data driven, having a 360 view on the business so that you're sort of the center of knowledge was the third thing. And then the fourth is like picking your superpower and focusing on it. So I want to sort of like touch on each of those. So yeah, on the storytelling,
Mhm.
I I think especially earlier in our careers as PMs, we don't get to do too much sort of like big vision, big product launches, right? Like you might be maybe given a backlog of feature requests, and you might be, or helping with something that's more focused on maintenance and helping engineering, or just answering customer problems on pricing. um, so like how do you think about working on those kind of sort of storytelling skill sets when maybe early on you don't have that opportunity, and how do you get to that place?
That's a great question. I this is sort of an aside, but I think one of the things that's helped my career the most is finding as many mentors as I can.
Mm,
So I'm always quoting my mentors, but one of my mentors said when I hit a slump in my career at Microsoft was you need to find the meaning in what you're doing, regardless of how boring it may seem to you, because there is a meaning there. And if you can find that meaning, you can turn a boring task into something that feels meaningful. And I say
mm,
that to mean you are exactly correct. Early in your career, a lot of the things you're going to be doing are more top down than bottom up.
mhm,
Really, it does also depend on the company you're coming from, but I promise you that there is some learning you can get from it. So in the case where you're even prioritizing a backlog of features, that is an enormous skill of being a PM. And it
mhm,
is one of the things that I feel like really separates good PMs from great PMs from superstar PMs is prioritization. So it may seem like it is boring or it is like a busy task in the moment, but if you
mhm,
can get really good at prioritizing, it'll help you enormously when you are not prioritizing for feature requests, but you're
mm,
prioritizing a whole division of a company, right? So I
right.
think it is like the same thing of like when you're playing a sport is building on the fundamentals. One of the primary fundamentals of being a PM is prioritization. So
Yeah.
understanding how to prioritize, why you're prioritizing a certain way, talking to people that are more senior than you, asking how they might prioritize things.
And then on the data driven side, can you tell me about, maybe an example that you have seen firsthand, or you've done yourself, of like using data to influence roadmap, and how that helped your team?
Yeah. And I'll backtrack a little bit. So um being data driven is extremely important. Data can come in multiple different forms. Even in some ways that maybe people won't consider data. And I say that to say there was a feature that when I got to Microsoft, when I first got to Microsoft, I was a very junior PM. It's a feature that I identified early on that I felt was extremely important to get put
Mm,
into the product. Um, and I could not convince the engineering team that it was an important feature to be put into the project. So it took me like a year, more than a year, to convince them that it should be in the product.
wow.
In the end, it did end up working out, but that was a failing on my part. That was not a failing on the engineering part.
Mhm,
I did not make a convincing enough argument. In my head, I was like, this is so obvious. Why can't people see this? But the issue was that I was not coming with the correct data.
mm,
And what I realized was that data for me was actually to just have the engineering team sit in on a customer conversation.
mm,
And once they heard it directly from the customer and they could put it in the context of this is a real issue, instantly it flipped in their mind. And it's not because they didn't trust me. It's not because they didn't think that what I was saying wasn't smart, but it's one thing to hear this is important. It's another thing to go and see it.
mm,
So um data is great. It's a great way of conveying impact, right? But if you can even take people directly to the source of the impact, even better.
mm,
And I guess what I'm saying is that it goes back to sort of like the leading without influence is a big part of PM is convincing people that something is worth doing.
mm.
Data is just one of those tools, but it's a very powerful tool. But um, I guess what I'm saying is data is probably the biggest tool in your toolbox, but you should always be open to other things as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally like sympathize with that, pain point of trying to convince someone, and how much easier it is when you bring them in early on in in your thought process, and sort of like work together as a partnership, whether it's UX design and engineering and PM, and not thinking of it as I've seen some vision, now I have to go convey to the rest of the team. Like you have a much higher uphill fight, especially when you're a junior, right? Earlier in our careers.
Exactly.
I love that one. That's a good one. All right. And then on 360 view, I think this is the hardest one, honestly,
Mhm,
to be the center of knowledge and of insight for everyone, right?
mhm.
So, whether it's sales teams, engineering, the design team, they're all coming to you for the latest on um, the technology, the customer problem. So, yeah, how do you effectively do that and still, manage to do the rest of your job as well, right? Like, how do you answer all of these questions and needs from all these stakeholders?
Yeah, that is a great question, and that is a really hard one. I will admit, I think that this is what I was probably the worst at when I first started my career as a PM,
Yeah,
because I think I tried to do everything. Like,
yeah,
not only would I be sitting with the design team, but I'd also be like trying to get down to the nitty gritty with the engineering team and understand all the intricacies. You just cannot do that. I think it sounds very simple, but a big way of this is you don't have to be an expert on everything. If
hmm,
you're in a meeting with somebody where you know technical questions are going to come up, bring an engineer.
yeah,
They're normally happy to sit in on it. Like you should understand the basic level of how things are working. You don't need to understand the zeros and the ones.
hmm,
That's what the engineering team is there for. So bring them with you. I think that's the first thing. But then I would also say be extremely curious, ask a
yeah.
lot of questions early on, and make so you're at the point where you feel comfortable and confident that you understand the full shape of the product.
And then the last bit is the superpower,
Mhm.
which I think we touched on a little bit. But if there's anything that you think we missed regarding the superpower and how you should really focus on, being really good at one thing, especially early on, and doing it effectively, that'd be good.
Yeah, I think the real takeaway with the superpower thing is you want to make sure you're having impact. And most people are not good at everything. At least I haven't met one yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really identifying what that thing is for you and leveraging that. That doesn't mean that you disregard the other parts of being a PM, but it means lean into that because what you really want to do is help move that ball up the hill. That's what we're all doing, right? That's what engineering
Yeah,
is doing. That's what design is doing. And as PM, you're really driving that push up the hill. And the best way to do that is to lean into the best parts of yourself.
love it.
So one of the things that I've realized is that because of my engineering background, I can relate to engineering a bit more than somebody who doesn't have it, right? I lack a business background. So I have friends that haven't, such as yourself, who have a lot more business understanding than I do. So when it comes to things that have to do with business, I don't push my weight there because I realize the effort that I'm putting there is not going to result in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the ball moving. But if
Yeah.
I throw my weight into the technical side of things, I can actually help move that ball forward. And so I guess find the people that sort of supplement your weaknesses and find the holes that you can fill with your strengths is really
Mm-hmm.
the message there. And it's really a thing of trial and error too. You try some things and see, is this something that gels with me? Is it not? Is this something that am I helping the team? Am I not?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Bema, it's been really great talking to you. I really enjoyed this conversation. So thanks for joining us for the very first episode, and I'll see you around.
Awesome.